Chapter 546. Breakout. You scared me. The voice that came out of Lord Grimm's character was actually a female's voice, who seemed to be grumbling at the person sitting next to her. Chen Guo hadn't thought that, as soon as Lord Grimm had logged on, her entire screen would be surrounded by light. Lord Grimm was completely enveloped by the satellite beam. Using this beautiful screen, no one noticed Lord Grimm's appearance. Because of the short period of invulnerability after logging in, Lord Grimm didn't receive any damage from the satellite beam. The reason behind Yi Shu choosing to control the satellite beam's split pillars manually was to force the surrounding enemies away. When Lord Grimm appeared and ran, no one would be able to block him immediately. However, escaping just like this clearly wasn't going to happen. Lord Grimm's log-off location had been marked as the center of the encirclement. The satellite beam descended on this location. The enemy encirclement had only been disturbed by Yi Shu's chasing haze, as well as Wei Chen's group. Actually breaking through would require much more effort than just running. Hurry up, Chen Guo anxiously urged. She was already standing up, while controlling Lord Grimm. Yi Shu quickly shifted to where she stood. Chen Guo also hastily moved away. The two switched characters, both attempting to escape. Chen Guo's chasing haze had originally been outside of the encirclement, but the enemy had instructed a team to surround her, but because of Wei Chen's sudden ambush, this team was instructed to hold their position, so chasing haze didn't have as much trouble escaping. The challenge was getting Lord Grimm to escape. Even though he had logged on cleanly without anyone immediately noticing his presence, he had now been completely exposed. Everyone immediately abandoned Wei Chen's 20 players and switched to chasing Lord Grimm. When Wei Chen saw that his gang wasn't even be considered bait and the enemy side completely ignoring them, he couldn't tolerate it. With an angry shout, he charged at the enemies, along with his gang, to prove their existence. Teams 5, 7, and 8 blocked that side. Everyone else surround Lord Grimm. The group leader could see the entire situation clearly. He had the 3 closest teams block Wei Chen's assault and had everyone else continue pursuing Lord Grimm. Yi Shu hadn't touched glory in 2 days. Now that he had control over Lord Grimm again, he was filled with energy. He swiped his mouse and Lord Grimm shot his gun at the ground behind him. He flew into the air and onto a dead tree branch. On this dead tree branch hung the poor player who had been blasted into the air by the heat-seeking missiles. The tree branch couldn't hold the weight of both players and broke. The poor player fell. This attack had been too sudden. The players below were running while they aimed their weapons at Lord Grimm, when they heard a cry from above their heads. Before they could lift their heads, their cameras went staggering towards the sky and they tumbled into the mud. Lord Grimm turned around. With a flash, the slash from a sword draw flew towards 2 players who were trying to flank him from the left. The players who were coming from the right were just about to use their own sword draws, when Lord Grimm suddenly leapt into the air towards them and disappeared from their sight. Yi Shu had used a Z-shake in order to slide past these players without slowing down. The blockade formed by these 3 players had been broken through, but there were still a lot of players left. Yi Shu looked around in a circle. Without stopping, he quickly figured out the most optimal pathing. He crouched and rolled forward, dodging an attack from the left. As he got up, he blasted the enemy player away with a falling flower palm. However, because of the over 10 level difference, the blow-away effect from the falling flower palm was greatly reduced. It couldn't even be considered a blow-away, more like a trip. Yi Shu also felt grieved. If Lord Grimm had been level 70 and the falling flower palm worked normally, breaking through this encirclement would be a piece of cake. This had been within Yi Shu's calculations though. He continued running forward past the tripped player. Another pincer attack from the left and right came. Yi Shu accurately predicted which attack would arrive first. He shook his 1000-chance umbrella into a spear and stabbed towards the left. Then, with a circle swing, he swung the enemy player on the left into the enemy player on the right, slamming both enemies into the ground. Fast. Too fast. The players that were still a distance away from Lord Grimm could only become spectators for now. In their eyes, Lord Grimm's attack had been very fast. Attack speed. This stat wouldn't increase as one leveled up. The only things that affected attack speed were the player's skill, equipment, and the special effects of their skills. If a player's skill was the only deciding factor in attack speed, then in theory, attack speed could be limitless. From this perspective, equipment was what restricted one's attack speed. However, in reality, this was a misconception. In Glory, weapons had an attack speed that ranged from 1 to 10. If a player's skill was poor, they might only be able to utilize an attack speed of 7 or 8, despite having a weapon with an attack speed of 10. If a player's skill was good, then the player could reach an attack speed of 10, but couldn't go any higher than that. However, a player could increase their attack speed with a skill. There might be a limit for speed, but how does one attack in the fastest way possible? By taking the shortest attack route. Thus, it could be said that in order to increase attack speed through the player's skill, the player needed to be precise, not quick. Precise judgment and control was required to perform the attack along the shortest route. Even with similar attack speeds, if one player attacks along a different route, it would take slightly longer for their attack to arrive. Lord Grimm's attack looked very fast because of this. In reality, all of the forms of the Thousand Chance Umbrella had an attack speed of 5, but that didn't necessarily mean that this was his limit. An attack speed of 10 couldn't be considered the limit either. It was simply a limit set by the weapon. Other equipment and the effects from skills could also increase a player's attack speed. However, because of the mechanics of the game, having higher attack speed wasn't always better. If a player's attack speed was too high and the player couldn't keep up, then the player wouldn't be able to fully utilize the speed. The guild players were astonished at the speed of Lord Grimm's attack, but was Lord Grimm only fast with his attacks? His movement speed was also the same. Yi Shu's extremely good control over his stamina allowed his movement speed tempo to constantly change, making the pursers unable to properly grasp it. They would predict that Lord Grimm would move to a spot, so they would release an attack targeting this spot. However, when Lord Grimm actually arrived at that spot, he would always seem to step over their attacks. They felt like Lord Grimm wouldn't reach a spot yet, so they held their attacks, but when they attacked, all they saw was his back. The guild's encirclement went from scattered to orderly, but before they could rearrange the troops properly, Lord Grimm had already broken through. Along the way were bodies flipped into the ground. No one had been severely hurt, but they lost their chance at blocking Lord Grimm. By the time they recovered, they would only see the body of the next person being thrown into the ground. Stop him. Stop him. Stop him. The group leader, who could be considered rational and quick-witted, could only resort to this. It wasn't that he didn't want a concrete formation. Lord Grimm's actions far surpassed the speed at which he could react. By the time he had thought of a way to stop him, Lord Grimm had already gotten past that section. He tried making predictions, but with Lord Grimm's weird pathing, he had no way to predict how Lord Grimm would break through. Conventionally speaking, the fastest way to break through was in a straight line, but Lord Grimm was already halfway out and anyone could see that he wasn't moving in a straight line. He just moved wherever there was a hole. Where were the opportunities? Answering this question and then making the arrangements would require the group leader to think twice as much as Yi Shu needed to. There was no way the leader could win a mind game like this. Besides shouting, "Stop him," he didn't know what else he could do. In the blink of an eye, Lord Grimm had broken past the final layer and rushed out of the encirclement. Everyone was stunned. What just happened? Everything happened so quickly. When did he break out of the encirclement? But after seeing everyone lying on the ground, they felt like a long amount of time should have passed, right? No one could get a clear understanding of the situation, but they could understand one thing: Lord Grimm had successfully escaped. Their 80 players had been thrown into disarray by an outside force and then broken through just like that. Chase! The group leader shouted. He felt like his voice was very mechanical. He felt like it was what he should shout. As for what he should do after, he had no idea. Old thing, I'll be heading out first. They heard Lord Grimm shout. Go, go. This senior is going to slaughter everyone here, a coarse voice responded. Lord Grimm ran away, but the 20 rescuers hadn't. They had been killing the entire time, whether they were against 3 players, 4 players, 5 players, or even 10 players. In the end, these 20 players eventually turned into corpses. They dropped some equipment, but the guild players couldn't feel happy at all. Compared to the equipment that they had lost, these 20 players had profited a lot more. They had no way of getting their lost equipment back either. They had been helpless against Lord Grimm's escape, but these 20 players had killed off 39 of their own players. They had lost almost twice as many people, and this was with the opposing side having incomplete equipment and levels. When the team leaders reported back to their respective guilds, they said this to their guild leaders: "We successfully eliminated the rescue team, but Lord Grimm escaped." Chapter 547. The wealthy are aggressive and powerful. The spawn camp on Lord Grimm operation had failed again. Windward Formation and his group of people were still employing guerrilla warfare tactics. As these guerrillas fought, they became weaker and weaker. 2 teams wasn't considered a lot, but it still surpassed the number of players on a standard team. Their tactics were dirty and nimble too, making the big guilds unbelievable annoyed, but what happened next threw Wei Chen's little annoyance into the back of their minds. The post, which the guilds had nervously hoped wouldn't come, finally appeared. Heavenly Justice. This guild had already been officially announced as the guild for the new incoming team and used their identity as a club to make a statement. For the business-structured club guilds, this action was highly looked down upon. Heavenly Justice declared that they would always put their players first. They definitely wouldn't be like other clubs, who prioritized their business and treated their own guild members like slaves. This statement made the large guilds go crazy. Slaves? Didn't we already give a clear explanation? Which guild dared to treat their supporters like slaves? The guilds really obtained a lot of goods and materials from their guild members, but it wasn't like they completely took it all for themselves. The guilds had a solid guild storage system. Everyone donated items on their own volition and gained corresponding contribution points. The higher the contribution points, the greater the benefits they would receive. This was clearly a win-win situation for both sides. How could this be called slave labor? But before the guilds could respond, someone posted the guild storage systems of each of the top guilds and analyzed them. The poster picked out a random second-rate orange equipment from one of the guilds. In order to obtain an equipment of this grade, the player required 15,000 guild contribution points. In order to get 15,000 contribution points and, excluding the points earned from doing daily tasks, according to the guild's setup, the amount of items required to be donated would be equivalent to around 30,000 gold coins. 30,000 gold coins is enough to buy several second-grade orange equipments. I believe that everyone in the heavenly domain should know this. Quote, the poster concluded, as for the guild, this donation of 30,000 gold coins is theirs to use. In addition, if the equipment traded in is ever lost, there will be a guild contribution penalty. 15,000 guild contribution points can't get a player a full set of second-rate orange equipment either. There's a limit to the number of equipment that can be traded in. For this guild, the limit is 4 pieces of equipment. Quote. When the guild saw this analysis, they went into a frenzy. This analysis made the issue seem very black and white. The other side's analysis wasn't wrong, but it neglected a few important points. Firstly, the other side lightly skipped over the part about compensation from participating in daily activities, but in reality, guilds had a lot of daily tasks and every player who participated in a dungeon run for the guild would receive all sorts of compensation for their work. People who accumulated 15,000 guild contribution points definitely didn't get all of it through donations. Secondly, the other side neglected the value of second-rate orange equipment. How many pieces of second-rate orange equipment could 30,000 gold coins get? That was hard to say. Even if you had the money, you would have trouble finding even one to buy. Thirdly, the penalty for lost equipment and the limitation on the number of equipment. These were completely necessary. If not, spies would rack up the necessary guild contribution points, trade it for equipment, and then have others kill him for the equipment to drop. Without a penalty or limit, the spy could rinse and repeat forever. How could the guilds allow something so stupid happen? Heavenly Justice's guild storage system must have some sort of similar system to prevent this from happening too. Lots of intentionally misleading analyses came out. Before the guilds could refute them, Heavenly Justice floated in and spoke frankly of the discrepancies in these analyses. This type of thing was because of this. For example, the limit on the number of equipment and penalties for losing equipment had to be implemented. However, in comparison, our Heavenly Justice requires less guild contribution points and so on. The guilds were still writing their refutes, when Heavenly Justice jumped out to do it for them. When they took a closer look, F***ck, the people analyzing never said whether or not they were from Heavenly Justice or not. Before anyone could respond, one of the analysts replied, saying how just Heavenly Justice was. Compared to other club guilds, their benefits were much better. Heavenly Justice was very mighty. Soon afterwards, Heavenly Justice quickly replied, showing their humbleness. How can our grassroots team even be compared with those powerful pro teams? One side gave praise, while the other side replied. The other guilds didn't even have time to reply. Everyone was coughing blood from anger. The two sides were clearly in cahoots. The guilds had been kicked to the opposite of the people's side. Heavenly Justice seemed to be the leader of the people. Grassroots team? Grassroots my ass. Heavenly Justice's guild leader was a famous money warrior in the game. If it weren't for his money, how could he evenly compete with the club guilds? How could people like him even be considered grassroots? Of course, Heavenly Justice's guild storage system required less contribution. Their guild storage system couldn't come close to the top guilds. All of the top guilds knew this to be fact. Because the rewards for wild bosses and dungeon records were completely monopolized by the club guilds. Money couldn't buy these rewards. If a guild storage didn't have good equipment, the guild contribution required would obviously be less. Heavenly Justice failed to mention this point. They enticed players by saying they required less guild contribution points and supported it by posting screenshots of the guild storages of other guilds. Every single big guild madly gave their statements, giving a detailed explanation of their guild storage system, saying how rare and difficult it was to even find second-rate orange equipment on the market. Some even pointed their fingers at Heavenly Justice, daring them to post a screenshot of their own guild storages. Your guild storage don't even have anything in it, so you obviously would require less guild contribution points for the highest tier of items. Others directly had their spies screenshot Heavenly Justice's guild storage. Sure enough, the higher tier items couldn't compare to the big guilds. However, Heavenly Justice simply laughed, saying we required less guild contribution points, so a lot of our players already have enough points to rent out those items. Right now, those players were wearing the equipment, so of course you can't see it in the storage. Unlike you guys, who have such high requirements that all of the equipment is left in the storage, unable to be traded away. For a moment, the forums heated up. Everyone favored Heavenly Justice's words. Their eyes opened up, unable to take in everything that they witnessed. Chen Guo once again discovered the war of words while browsing about in boredom. She hastily pulled Yishu over to see. Yishu looked and praised Heavenly Justice's powerful move. Are they going too far? Chen Guo asked. This time, Heavenly Justice directly challenged all of the clubs. What's there to be afraid of? Their previous statement already ridiculed the clubs. Now, they're putting themselves and the other clubs on two different sides. It's really smart, you know. They know that directly stealing fans away from these clubs is practically impossible. However, by challenging all of the other clubs, some of the players will certainly waver during this dispute. Even if there weren't a lot of these players only have one way to go. For the other clubs, you have so many choices to choose between, but the opposite side only has one Heavenly Justice. With this one move, they made themselves much more popular. But souring their relationship with the other clubs won't be good for them, no? Chen Guo asked. Yes, that's certainly true. But the problem is, think of the other side's background. You said it before about Lulan Slash. He's a famous money warrior in Glory. He relied on throwing money at the game in order to compete with these club guilds and form a pro team. His family background definitely isn't simple. He has confidence that he can reach the top. Why should he act so timidly in front of them? The wealthy truly are aggressive and powerful, Yishu sighed. After saying this, Yishu took a look at the posts and then pointed at some of the content. Look, something like this isn't possible for someone like me who's building a guild from scratch. Chen Guo looked. Heavenly Justice made a statement saying that they had a lot of players apply, but because of the player limit in the guild, they decided to create another branch of their guild. The branch's guild storage would be set up quickly. However, the guild's level would require the effort of the players. Chen Guo thought about how it hadn't been long since Heavenly Justice had announced the creation of their pro team, yet they had already become so popular. On the other hand, their side was faced with numerous difficulties. She couldn't help but become depressed and hated how powerless she was. At this moment, Yishu received a message from Wei Chen on QQ. Wei Chen had also seen the war of words on the forums from Heavenly Justice. F***CK, this Heavenly Justice is quite aggressive. This senior has heard about the wealth of their guild leader a long time ago, but I didn't think he was ambitious enough to create his own team. Speaking of this, didn't your Lord Grimm join them? Don't tell me this guy is going to be our boss, Wei Chen asked. Seeing Wei Chen's message, Chen Guo couldn't help but feel ashamed. When she saw Yi Shu quickly reply, "No, our boss is the woman who you ridiculed the other day." *CK me, what am I doing here then? I should pack up and seek asylum at Heavenly Justice. Do you want to go to Heavenly Justice to spy on them? No need for that. Didn't I say our accounts came from Heavenly Justice? Yi Shu replied. Minnesota, you thought that far ahead and already saw the potential in Heavenly Justice so long ago? Wei Chen was surprised. No, it was a pure coincidence, Yi Shu said. Even if it's just a coincidence, you still have to be able to seize it. I already know how shameless you are, but speaking of this, I had something I wanted to ask you about. I almost forgot. After mumbling to himself, he was quickly reminded of something and immediately followed, right, about the accounts you gave me, why aren't there any knights? Oh, I kept the knight. I have a use for it. You'll have to make up for this discrepancy yourself. Chapter 548. Unrivaled Super Hottie. Why do you need a knight account? Wei Chen asked through QQ. Chen Guo, who was sitting beside him, also asked. Yi Shu laughed, typing and saying the same thing, to be a tank. You don't say. Wei Chen replied as he sent a rolling his eyes emoji. Chen Guo, who was beside him, demonstrated a real-life eye roll while repeating the exact same words. So what are you planning on doing? Chen Guo asked again. I'll join a guild and play as a tank, Yi Shu said. Did you mean to say that you're also going to be a spy? Pretty much. Yi Shu's reply wasn't too clear. It looked his role couldn't just be described as being a spy. Chen Guo didn't fully understand what Yi Shu meant, but she didn't ask any further. Yi Shu was still playing on Lord Grimm. He was very close to level 55 and reached level 55 that afternoon, finally passing the level 50 to 55 stage, the most difficult stage he would face as an unspecialized character. You've finally reached level 55, Chen Guo felt the barrier had now been passed. You're right, I'm finally level 55. I can start running dungeons to level up from now on. Leveling through dungeons is a lot easier. Yi Shu sighed. Chen Guo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The difference between dungeoning and leveling areas was that you gain more experience through dungeon runs, but you could never say that it was easier. How hard was a dungeon? If you died carelessly a few times, you might lose even more experience than you would gain. However, Yi Shu was a freak. He was the most hated player in the eyes of the big guilds and had to play cautiously while leveling in leveling areas. He had to leave every time he saw a random stranger. Inside a dungeon, it really would be a lot easier for him than in leveling area. You said just yesterday that Lulan Slash isn't afraid to oppose the other big guilds, but I don't think you were ever afraid of them in the first place. I've never seen you try to maintain a good relationship with them. Chen Guo said. Yi Shu smiled and replied in a bitter tone, I don't have a choice. I don't have much time. I can only take the risky path. High risk, high reward. Other than that, what can I do to create a whole new team? Our aim isn't to pass the seeding tournament, but to be a threat to the other teams. I see, Chen Guo understood. Let me bring you through a dungeon. Right after she said this, Yi Shu logged out of Lord Grimm. Since I'm already level 55, leveling isn't priority anymore, Yi Shu smiled. Actually, Wei Chen's long year of research about earning extra skill points was now his priority. Along with that research, managing his account became a lot easier, so Yi Shu had more time to do other things now. Yi Shu pulled out the Knight account card, after he logged out from Lord Grimm. Logging into the game, he turned his head and asked Chen Guo, do you have any money? Yes. How much do you need? Chen Guo reached for her purse immediately. I meant in-game money. Yi Shu was speechless. Oh, game money. Chasing Haze has about 10,000 gold, Chen Guo said. In Glory, 100 or 200 gold coins wasn't considered rich. 1,000 to 2,000 would be the starting point and was the amount most players had. 10,000 gold coins was the border between being rich or not rich. Chen Guo used to a member of a club guild, so she could be considered as a high-end player. 10,000 gold coins was a healthy amount of money. Give me everything, I'm going to buy some equipment. Yishu logged into his brand new night account. All the accounts that Yishu had won last time had been checked by himself and Chen Guo. They were almost all completely empty accounts. Even if they had equipment, they were at best green mission equipments. Speaking of which, Ma Chengyi not giving them normal server accounts was already considered not being cheap. The difference between level 70 characters in normal servers and the heavenly domain was huge. Ma Chengyi's 24 accounts were all blank, but at least they were heavenly domain accounts. This night account had 4,160 skill points, which was a very common amount. The few items he had equipped were all green recycle equipment. After a short scan, the stats for this character hadn't been completed either. Apparently, it had yet to finish all the missions that gave stat books. It would be really hard to figure out which quests were missing unless the previous owner was playing. Yishu didn't care about these 5 or 10 extra stat points. It was the previous owner's ID that truly showed how extraordinary he was. Unrivaled Super Hottie was its name, extraordinarily not low-key. Yishu couldn't be bothered by the incomplete stats, however this badass name made him a little uncomfortable deep inside. Yishu had long since passed the age where one would tell others how good-looking he was with his ID. Come and get your money. Chen Guo looked at Yishu controlling Unrivaled Super Hottie, causing her to laugh inaudibly, then logged into Chasing Haze to give Yishu the money. Chasing Haze had 13,251 gold coins. She gave Unrivaled Super Hottie 13,000 gold coins, keeping the remaining 251. Yishu was thinking as he walked to the trading center, and in a very short while, he walked out in new clothes. Chen Guo quickly ran over because she wanted to know how a pro player would choose equipment for a tank. She was shocked the moment she leaned forward. Click on them so I can see, Chen Guo said in disbelief. Yishu opened Unrivaled Super Hottie's equipment panel, showing them off one by one to Chen Guo. While saying, there is still 8,000 coins left, you can have them back. Why are you saving so much money? Go get better items, Chen Guo said. All the equipment that Yishu bought were blue. Who in Heavenly Domain didn't had a few purple equipment, even if they didn't have any orange ones? Especially for tanks, in a stable team, it was always the first character that was invested in. A purple weapon and purple shield were the bare minimum. Turned out that Yishu gave Unrivaled Super Hottie a very random blue weapon and shield. To be honest, a tank's job was probably the most important, and a tank's equipment wasn't expensive. Because playing as a tank was a harsh job and the difficulty was high, ordinary players either misplayed the class or were too lazy to bother. It led to a small amount of tank players. The fewer players, the less demand, and the price wouldn't go up. With 13,000 gold coins, players could barely afford a luxury weapon, but if you wanted to get a set of blue defensive equipment, a purple weapon and shield, it was more than possible. It's all right, Yishu smiled and continued sending a trade request. Just keep the money, there's no meaning in giving it back to me. Chen Guo waved her hand and rejected. It was only a few thousand gold coins, so Yishu clearly didn't really put it to mind. Chen Guo didn't want it back, so he just kept it. He then switched to QQ and messaged Lulan / Your recent move was very well played, Yishu started the conversation. Haha, I just happened to get the chance. Lulan / was pretty satisfied with his move. Seeing how aggressive you were, are you sufficiently prepared? Yishu asked. It's going so-so, Lulan / replied. The reason I wanted to message you is to ask for some information, Yishu said. What's up? Lulan / asked. Do you know which subguilds belong to Tyrannical Ambition? Yishu asked. God, you don't know, Lulan / was surprised. It's because I am a god that I don't know, Yishu said. I see, Lulan / suddenly realized the reason. Yishu was at the very top. Low-tier jobs, like guild management, wasn't something he was informed about. Let me check, Lulan / had clearly been preparing for a long time. From the guild to the Prawl team, they had both carefully been planned out. For their future opponents, they were also investigated from the guilds to their pro teams. There are a lot of subguilds in each large guild. Some are very obvious and others are more hidden. You want information about Tyrannical Ambition, right? I'll send you a copy after I compile a list. Lulan Slash didn't hide their grasp of the situation. Although Yishu hadn't given them any material assistance, but he had helped give them a lot of mental guidance. In particular, he allowed them to see their true position. This alone had greatly helped their chances of survival in the pro scene. If they really thought that they could win the championships like they had in the old days, they would be packing up as soon as they entered. Okay. Yishu received the document that Lulan Slash sent him shortly after. According to the document, Tyrannical Ambition had 27 branch guilds. Of these 27 branch guilds, 5 were publicly known, 7 of them were hidden and only Lulan Slash knew about them. The other 15 were marked with question marks, indicating that they were still unconfirmed. Yishu took a look and it was similar to what he had predicted. Although he did not know the exact situation of Tyrannical Ambition, as the former leader of Excellent Dynasty, a lot of information would flow towards him, even if he didn't want to know. Tyrannical Ambition and Excellent Dynasty were both old-school guilds, so the difference shouldn't be that huge. Lulan Slash had dug out 27 of them, but he also knew that his list might not be complete. The reason they hid them was not to hide their overall power. In fact, the real power of each guild could still be directly seen from their main guild. The members of branch guilds were players that might not necessarily fans of Tyrannical Ambition, but the guild was definitely secretly supporting or directly controlled by Tyrannical Ambition. They hoped to expand their control over resources and information through this method. Keeping them a secret was to prevent competitors from causing problems. And for those guilds that everyone knew, it was the same as the main guild, full of fans. Even if you weren't one, you had to pretend to be one in order to acquire the benefits. Chapter 549. I'm a tank. You're planning on infiltrating Tyrannical Ambition? Chen Guo had been sitting in front of the computer for the entire day. 50% of her attention had been directed towards seeing what Yishu was doing. If she needed to help Yishu write a daily or weekly report, she didn't want to miss anything. Yes, Yishu nodded his head. He was used to Chen Guo watching him and asking him questions from time to time. I feel bad for Tyrannical Ambition, Chen Guo said. Ha, of course, Yishu laughed. After seeing Lulan Slash's intelligence report, he immediately began searching for the listed guilds. The branches of Tyrannical Ambition that everyone knew about weren't guilds that Yishu could get into because these branches raised Tyrannical Ambition's banners. Fans of Tyrannical Ambition were lining up to squeeze into one. With Glory's player base nowadays, filling several guilds couldn't be considered incredible anymore. These branches of Tyrannical Ambition were all full. The big guilds won people over by virtue, so it wasn't likely for them to kick someone out just to add someone out of kindness. Besides, who would be so kind to Yishu? Knock on their door, tell Zhang Yu, I'm Yichu, could you kick someone out and let me in? If Zhang Yu didn't immediately summon thousands of players to kill him, that would already be considered quite kind. Thus, Yishu had to choose from the hidden branches of Tyrannical Ambition or the guilds allied with Tyrannical Ambition. Lulan Slash had given him a detailed report. He even had introductions for who controlled these branches. In the end, Yishu chose a guild which someone from Tyrannical Ambition directly had control over. It was a guild called Exterminate the Heavens. Yishu felt like such an arrogant name perfectly matched his unrivaled super hottie. Then, there was Exterminate the Heavens guild leader, Senior Exterminate the Heavens. No explanation was needed. Yishu applied for the guild without any hesitation. If Yishu didn't have the information given by Lulan Slash, Senior Exterminate the Heavens guild would only seem like a normal player guild. Although it was also a max-leveled guild, it only had a little over 1,000 players. This was pretty much the limit for normal guilds. The guild leader's charisma could only do so much. Any more players and the guild would be very difficult to manage. The guild would need to use the guild storage as a foundation. However, building up a solid guild storage wasn't easy for normal players. They would never be able to compete with the money and prestige that a club guild possessed. Guild Exterminate the Heavens had 1024 players. For a normal guild, it was quite good. As long as the guild storage system began to circulate, the guild would gradually grow. These types of guilds could indirectly become branches of the club guilds. The clubs obviously wouldn't throw money to build up their guild storage. They just needed to make sure that the guild didn't fall apart and the guild would naturally grow larger and stronger. As a normal guild, this sort of business wasn't something normal players would know about. As their gaming lives progressed, they would unknowingly grow alongside the guild. After Yishu sent in an application, he pondered over his plan, while waiting for the reply to come. The reason he had confidence in being accepted was very simple. Normal guilds didn't have players lining up to join them like the club guilds did. Normal guilds just added whoever wanted to join them. They might as well add you for now. Besides, Yishu wrote a note when he applied. It was only 3 words, but these words were very eye-catching. The 3 words were, "I'm a tank." Yes, a tank. Most teams were centered around the tank. It could even be said that the number of teams were restricted to the number of tanks. If a team didn't have a tank, the team could only go and kill wild monsters. Dungeons and bossing would best be kept as dreams. Tanks were also high-end classes and difficult to play. Despite being the core of a team, not many people liked to play them. Thus, for most guilds, the words, "I'm a tank," was very desirable. Sure enough, not long after Yishu sent in an application, the guild added him. Someone in the guild greeted him, "Welcome, friend." Yishu looked at the ID, Clove. This player was most likely a girl. After sending a thanks smiley face, Yishu opened up the guild player list and skimmed through it. He also saw that the guild leader Senior Exterminate the Heavens was also online. Oh, a new member, Senior Exterminate the Heavens finally spoke. "Hi guild leader," Yishu typed. Chen Guo snorted, "So you're acting polite?" "Hey," Yishu said seriously. Then, he saw a bunch of people speak up in the guild chat. The majority of them were just lurking around. There might not be too many people online in a 1,000-player guild, but there were enough. The chat kept flashing as messages kept on being typed. The guild was quite active. "Whoa, a knight too. Are you a tank?" Someone saw the new member's class and shouted it out. Sure enough, the word tank was quite eye-catching. Knights were mainly played as tanks, but they didn't necessarily need to be. There were quite a few players who used knights as DPS classes. Of course, more players were interested in PvP. Knights had high defense and health, making them quite a formidable PvP class. "Yeah, I'm a tank," Yishu said. Oh, a tank. The guild leader clearly hadn't seen Yishu's guild application, so he hadn't seen the note. When he heard the new member was a tank, he was very happy. "What are your stats?" Exterminate the Heavens asked. Stamina 750, Strength 520, Intelligence 414, Spirit 405, Yishu reported. The chat suddenly fell silent. After a while, someone couldn't help but comment, "So weak." Knights grew in a balanced manner similar to unspecialized characters. However, tanks naturally chose their equipment in a certain way. Stamina and health were their priorities. The rest would be switched out depending on the situation. Stacking strength would increase their physical resistance. Stacking intelligence, on the other hand, would their increase magic resistance. Stacking spirit would increase debuff resistances. Different equipment could be used against different opponents. However, the stats Yishu reported didn't even pass as average. High-end tanks usually had over 1,000 stamina. The passing line for normal knights was 840 stamina. Yishu was lower than the normal knight passing line by 90 stamina. In terms of stats, he was a legendary squishy tank. "What are your equipments? Let me take a look at them." The guild leader Exterminate the Heavens sent a sweating emoji. "I haven't played in a long time, so my equips aren't that good," Yishu said. He let them have a look at his equipment. The guild veterans looked and sure enough, they were all outdated pieces of equipment. Nowadays, it wasn't difficult to reach the passing line. After all, tanks played a special role and their equipment wasn't too expensive. "How skilled are you?" Exterminate the Heavens asked. "Look at my name," Yishu proudly replied. "Ha," Chen Guo laughed. Unrivaled super haughty, Yishu's name made everyone go speechless. Even Senior Exterminate the Heavens felt defeated. After a long period of silence, he coughed, "Clove, make a team tonight and bring this brother out to get some equipment." Clove was the one who had added Yishu into the guild. She clearly had a fairly high position to have that sort of authority. Senior Exterminate the Heavens meant that you're responsible for the person you added. Clove didn't object and replied with an, "Okay, then." Yishu received a friend request from Clove. He accepted and then received a message from Clove. "When are you free tonight?" "I'm free anytime," Yishu said. "Then is 7 okay?" "Sure." I'll message you at 7 then, Clove said. Sounds good. What dungeon will we be running tonight? Yishu asked. We'll be running Bone Dragon Abyss. The weapons and shields that from there are very suitable for you. The dungeon isn't too difficult either. Will there be any problems? Clove said. No, I was just asking. I'm going to go take a look at a guide, Yishu said. Clove was speechless. See you tonight, Yishu politely replied. Afterwards, the guild went quiet. The guild members were probably gossiping about unrivaled super hottie. After Yishu joined the guild, he didn't have much else to do, so he went to a night instructor. He reset his skill points and reallocated them. A skill reset wasn't free. The more times you used a skill reset, the more expensive it became. Besides, times when one made a huge mistake and needed to make a big fix, most players would wait until it was time for the game company to announce a special event for skill resets. Any other time, the players would just endure. Who would do a skill reset over a single error? At 7 p.m., Yishu finished eating and logged onto Unrivaled Super Hottie. Chen Guo didn't want to miss it and was ready to watch him play. As soon as he got on, Clove immediately messaged him, "You came?" "Yes, I'm here," Yishu replied. "Come to Kansas City, we'll go together," Clove typed. Yishu teleported to Kansas City. This was a level 70 city. Whether it was a map or a city, the place wouldn't be as empty as a level 55 place. One could fully experience the gathering place for all glory players. No server could compare to the liveliness of a level 70 area in the heavenly domain. At the north gate of Kansas City, Yishu saw Clove. She was a female cleric. Around her were 9 players with the tag guild Exterminate the Heavens. Bone Dragon Abyss was a 10-player dungeon. They had been waiting for Yishu to arrive. Yishu hastily had Unrivaled Super Hottie run over and turned on his guild tag. When he walked closer, he immediately asked, "Huh? Why is there another night? If an equipment comes out, it won't be easy to split." Chapter 550. You can just be a leecher. Yishu's question was normal. When they grouped up for a dungeon, under the given conditions, they would normally spread out the classes. This would prevent conflicts between players of the same class when they found a piece of equipment they needed. Many groups experienced great storms and disbanded because of this very reason. It was a problem that had to be considered seriously. In response to Yishu's question, someone humphed. "Bro, have you looked at my equipment? Would I want anything that drops from this dungeon?" When he heard this, it was obvious that the voice belonged to the knight and pride filled his voice. He obviously felt disdain towards Yishu, a useless tank whose vitality was only at 750. Clove also explained at once. "I called Crispy Bean over to help. He's our guild's chief tank. 950 vitality. Physical and magic defense, intelligence and strength are all over 762. He also has 700 spirit. If you were going to ask for help, why would you find a tank? There's me for a tank, right? Wouldn't it be better to find more DPS classes?" Yishu asked. Clove felt uncomfortable the moment she heard his question. She originally didn't intend to find a tank to help, but she felt uneasy when Yishu went to search for a guide for Bone Dragon Abyss this afternoon. A tank couldn't simply take on the leadership role just by looking at a guide. Driven by responsibility over the whole group, Clove couldn't entrust the whole group's life and death onto this tank who reads guides at the last minute. This explained why she specifically found a tank from the guild to help. She didn't expect Unrivaled Super Hottie was unable to tell good from bad. Whatever. All noobs are like this. Clove thought this way, but she didn't want to waste words on Yishu. She gathered everyone to start going into the dungeon. The tank called Crispy Bean wasn't happy though. "Oh wow, you're very capable, huh? To be honest, I'm not interested in this small dungeon at all. It's a total waste of my time. Since I'm not needed, then I shall take my leave." "If you leave, we'd be missing a person," Yishu said. "What, scared now?" Crispy Bean laughed coolly. "It's not possible for you to only have tank equipment, so if you just change to your damage-oriented equipment, wouldn't that work?" Yishu asked. If I become a DPS class, would you be able to hold it?" Crispy Bean was immediately angered. As the chief tank of the guild, of course it would be impossible for him to lack equipment. Apart from tank equipment, he also had a strong collection of combat equipments for a knight. If he really switched to damage-oriented equipment, he was absolutely confident that he would be able to squeeze into the top 10 of Guild Exterminate the Heavens. To be honest, he was looking forward for a chance to present his ability and damage output. You can try. Yishu actually gave him a chance. Very well. You said it yourself. Don't blame me if we get wiped. Crispy Bean's last sentence was aimed towards the crowd surrounding him. A flash on his character followed his statement, and it became evident that he already changed into his damage-oriented equipment. That's enough. Stop fooling around, Clove suddenly yelled out. Crispy Bean, you're still the tank. As Clove spoke, she also sent a private message to Yishu. What's up with you? Everyone grouped up to help you get equipment. This person has no reason to take your equipment. All you have to do is be a leecher. What is there to be unsatisfactory about? Yishu saw that this girl even communicated with him through private message, and that she was concerned about everyone's feelings. Yishu didn't continue to say anything else. In Crispy Bean's case, it was obvious that he didn't obey only because of Clove's previous yell. Yishu reckoned that Clove also messaged him in private. He soon changed back into his tank equipment. His view scanned over Yishu's unrivaled super hottie and stepped into the dungeon after giving a cold harumph. Other players closely followed after him into the dungeon. Yishu commanded unrivaled super hottie to follow. Chen Guo wasn't far away from her game. She looked as if she were watching a movie. When she saw that Yishu had started a conflict the moment he joined the group, she immediately felt that a good show would happen tonight. You really are unbelievable, Chen Guo lamented. I'm only speaking of the truth, Yishu spoke. Chen Guo deeply agreed with this. Everything Yishu said could drive a person crazy, but it was true. Chen Guo also believed Yishu's words. Even though 750 vitality was a little low, who was he? This chief tank of Exterminate the Heavens or whatever guild dared to challenge God Yichu? Chen Guo found it humorous just to think about it. Bone Dragon Abyss itself wasn't a difficult dungeon. In terms of tanks, a tank didn't need to have 840 vitality. The requirement line for 840 was expected of tanks themselves to enter more difficult group dungeons. A mere dungeon with only 10 people wouldn't even be necessary. What's more, with God Yichu's skills, who knew how much those skills could make up for in stats? As an onlooker, she only pitied that she had to watch things unfold from the sidelines. It should be known that a tank had a busy role. If a professional player like Yishu played one, she didn't know how fast the screen would move around, though it wouldn't be the first time she experienced it. A moment after, the 10 people of Guild Exterminate the Heavens was transported into Bone Dragon Abyss. Bone Dragon Abyss sat in a canyon. According to Glory's naming style, this canyon was named as Bone Dragon Abyss. The Wild Boss, Dungeon's final boss, and Hidden Boss were all bone dragons. According to the background storyline, these 3 bone dragons were actually brothers. Of course, that was when they had been alive, and now that they had become bone dragons, it was evident enough that they had already become imperishable organisms. Crispy Bean was Exterminate the Heavens' chief tank, so it could be said that he had gone through all of the dungeons in Glory. With Guild Exterminate the Heavens' strength, they might have some difficulties in completing difficult dungeons that required a group of 100 people. However, a dungeon with 10 people like this was nothing to Crispy Bean. This explained why the moment he entered the dungeon, he immediately rushed up to steamroll through the monsters. In his eyes, these dungeons only played the part of being thoroughly crushed. Yishu was one of the last of the 10-man team to enter the dungeon. By the time he was transported into the dungeon, the fight had already heated up at the front. A tank normally led the team in the dungeon. However, this was a dungeon that Crispy Bean looked down on, so why would he need to be the leader? Of course it wasn't needed. All he needed to do was cheer everyone on while they hurried to keep up with his pace. As a result, the whole group was more or less busy and messy. Yishu was able to spot that at first glance. Crispy Bean was undoubtedly a veteran and Clove wasn't bad, but several other people in the group had showed themselves to be a little unaccustomed. They weren't unaccustomed to the mechanics of the game, but towards the dungeon. To be able to make it into Heavenly Domain and complete the Heavenly Domains challenge, meant that they wouldn't have any trouble or unfamiliarities with their mechanical performance. However, when faced with a foreign dungeon, they would obviously be at loss at what to do or where to strike. There were beginners in the Heavenly Domain. Those who had just cleared the Heavenly Domain challenge would be considered beginners. There were only 2 people like this in the 10th server. But how about the other servers? Not all players that reached the minimum required level could complete the Heavenly Domains challenge on their first try. Yishu and Chao Yifan were exceptions. They were pro gamers and had skill to back them up, so they could pass the challenge at the mere levels of 50 or 55. However, towards normal players, the challenge task was most definitely not that simple. After reaching the minimum required level, a lot of people had to spend a certain amount of time to acquire stronger pieces of equipment. Using strong equipment to face quests and a lot of combat consumables could help in completing in the challenge. Moreover, the PvP arena could be counted as the easiest part for Yishu and Chao Yifan. However, it wasn't so easy for normal players. When fighting a boss, there was a regular pattern defined, but there was never a fixed pattern in PvP. In particular, the requirement to win consecutively was extremely fatal for normal players. As a result, newer servers like the 8th or 9th server had a lot of people who had reached level 70 but had yet to pass the challenge to enter the Heavenly Domain. On top of this, people didn't necessarily start from the 10th server. Actually, if a player would like to enter the Heavenly Domain as soon as possible, an older server would be a better choice. There would be high-leveled players to power level your character. The speed in which one could level up would be a lot faster in comparison to those in the new server. Therefore, there was a constant stream of players entering the Heavenly Domain. Yishu reckoned that the other 8 people belonged to this group of players. At the very least, they hadn't entered the Bone Dragon Abyss dungeon before. This group wasn't exactly organized just to assist him in getting better equipments. Clove also grouped up the people so they could come and try Bone Dragon Abyss. How could a group like this work without a leader? Crispy Bean didn't care about it, so only Clove could attempt to take charge. However, it was super inconvenient when she had to instruct Yishu. The reason being the name of Yishu's knight. Unrivaled Super Hottie. What was she supposed to call him? If she called him by the full name, it would take too long and be a waste of time. Call him Unrivaled? Super Hottie? Clove found it hard to call out any of the words broken apart. She wanted to puke just thinking about how shameless a person had to be to come up with such a name. In the end, Clove called Yishu you. She called the names of everyone else, except when she reached Yishu, she would say you, so on and so forth. After having gone through a little bit of confusion in the beginning of the dungeon, everything finally started to stabilize under Clove's commands. She was in the Heavenly Domain, so her foundation was already there. Dungeons were pretty much the same. Basic problems, like what to be aware of, was the same in every dungeon. These people obviously wouldn't make any noob mistakes. There wouldn't be any major problems if they obeyed the leader. The group continued killing as Crispy Bean gradually started to talk more, but he was mostly complaining. He was obviously very dissatisfied about their progression speed. In the end, he even cleared his throat and told everyone to do their best to focus on their damage output and not to worry about aggro going off the tank. Finally, the group reached the first boss. Before they fought the boss, they made some slight adjustments. When Crispy Bean opened up the damage output list, he mercilessly sent it into the group chat at once. Yishu's Unrivaled Super Hottie was ranked second to last, just above Clove, who was responsible for the healing. You really are a talent, Crispy Bean taunted. Not really. I'm just leeching, Yishu replied.